Johnny Depp has been through really hard times that most people couldn't deal with. Court cases, news stories, people talking about him. He got through all of it with quiet strength. But on this day, something different happened. Someone gave him a simple message. No cameras, no news reporters, just a few words on paper. At first, he read it calmly, but then something changed. His fingers got tighter, his breathing got slower, and for the first time in a long time, his hands really started to shake. Not because he was scared, not because he was angry, but because the message didn't talk to the movie star the world knows. It talked to the regular person the world forgot existed in that moment. It wasn't about being famous. It wasn't Hollywood. It was something way more powerful. They say being famous gives you everything. Bright lights, people clapping, fancy events. But what they never say is that fame also teaches you how to hide feelings behind fake smiles. Johnny Depp learned that skill a long time ago. After all the court cases, the headlines, the judgment from people who knew nothing about what really happened to him, he learned how to walk with steady hands, even when his heart was breaking. But on this quiet day, there were no camera flashes, no courtroom chairs, no lawyers, just a small envelope, and a silence that felt heavier than any interview question he'd ever faced. He held the message between his fingers almost carelessly at first. People hand him things all the time. Contracts, movie scripts, fan notes, legal papers filled with words written by people who had never even looked him in the eyes. But something about this envelope felt different. It wasn't thick. It didn't have any official stamp. It looked personal. He opened it slowly. The handwriting wasn't neat, like a professional's. It was a little bit messy, as if written by someone whose hand shook before writing every word. It started simply with no greeting, no introduction, just a sentence. A sentence that didn't ask him for anything. A sentence that didn't judge him. A sentence that did not talk to Johnny Depp, the Hollywood star. It talked to Johnny, the man who had been quietly hurting behind the curtain for years. As he read more, something inside him changed. It was small, so small that anyone else might have missed it, but his body didn't. His fingers stopped moving. His breath caught in his chest, and then it happened. His hands began to shake. Not the big kind of shaking you see in movies. No, it was small, almost invisible, but real. Real enough that he had to put the letter down for a moment just to steady himself. Because sometimes pain doesn't shake you. Getting better does. The words in that message weren't written for the world to hear. They were written for him to feel. Words that said, "I believe you." Words that whispered, "You don't have to explain yourself anymore." Words that carried a kind of quiet understanding that no judge, no fan, no critic had ever offered him so gently. In a world where people were quick to speak, but slow to listen, this message did something rare. It listened to him, not to his interviews, not to his statements, but to his silence. As he stood there holding that small note, something became clear. A single kind message can be louder than 1,000 mean accusations. For years, he had learned to stand tall even when the world tried to break him. But on this day, someone's simple faith in him did something unexpected. It made him feel humble. And that is a different kind of power. Most people think strong men don't break. But the truth is, the strongest are not the ones who never fall. They're the ones who feel deeply and still choose to stand. Johnny Depp didn't cry. He didn't make a scene. He didn't say a single word. But in that moment when his hands shook around that piece of paper, one thing became clear. Even legends hurt. But sometimes the right words can teach them how to breathe again. He stood still for a moment. The kind of stillness that isn't empty, but full of memories, full of echoes, full of feelings he had tucked away in the corners of his silence. Because when the world calls you a liar loud enough, even the strongest person begins to question their own heartbeat. And yet, this small message felt like a voice reaching through the noise, reminding him of something he had almost forgotten, that he was still human. People often look at famous people and think they don't feel things like regular people do. They think fame builds some kind of armor that can't be broken around the heart. But in reality, fame doesn't protect feelings. It makes them bigger. Every word cuts deeper. Every rumor burns longer. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, hits harder. Johnny Depp, the man millions love on screen, had been through battles most people couldn't imagine. Not the kind with swords and fire, but the kind where you stand alone while your name is dragged across headlines like a toy for public entertainment. Every day, a new headline. Every day, a new opinion. People spoke like they knew him, but they knew only what they were told. So when he read that letter written not with judgment, but with kindness, it did something rare. It made him feel seen, not for his roles, not for his fame, but for his heart. He traced a finger over the words again, slow, almost carefully, as if touching them too hard would break something special. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a dramatic confession. It was something way more powerful. It was belief. And belief is more healing than any apology could ever be. The message continued, not praising him like a fan, but noticing him like a human being. It said, sometimes people forget that strength doesn't mean smiling through everything. Sometimes strength simply means surviving. And you did. He read that line twice, maybe 3 times. The room around him stayed quiet, but inside his chest, something long buried woke up. A memory of the boy he once was. A boy who simply wanted to create art to make people feel something through his work. A boy who had never asked to be worshipped or destroyed. For a long moment, he just stood there breathing slowly, calming himself. Not as a celebrity, not as an icon, but simply as Johnny, a man who walked through fire and still chose kindness over bitterness. That is something the world rarely sees. People talk about victories like they're loud, but some victories are silent. Some come not in the roar of applause, but in the quiet acceptance that you have nothing left to prove. The message ended with a line so gentle, so unexpected that he had to close his eyes after reading it. I don't know you personally, but I see the way the world speaks about you. I just wanted to remind you, sometimes the world is wrong. That was it. No signature, no name, just truth. And in a world full of noise, truth is the rarest gift. Johnny breathed out slowly, his hands finally still, but his heart definitely moved. Some might say it was just a letter, just ink on paper, but anyone who has ever felt misunderstood knows. Sometimes a single sentence can save a person, not by changing their life, but by reminding them that they're still alive. The world often expects men, especially famous ones, to stay unshaken, to smile, to speak in perfect lines, to never flinch, never break, never show the kind of feelings that reveal a beating heart beneath all the glamour. But on that quiet day, Johnny Depp didn't look like a star. He looked like a man who had just been reminded that kindness still exists because it wasn't the length of the message that moved him. It was the honesty behind it. In a world where people write comments faster than they feel empathy, someone took the time to write something gentle. No accusations, no advice, no demands, just a quiet way of saying, I see you and I believe you. And that shook him more than any courtroom verdict ever could. He placed the message on the table, but his eyes stayed on it, almost afraid to look away, as if doing so would break whatever fragile truth had just formed in the air around him. There was a stillness inside him, but not the kind born from being numb. This was new, a stillness born from being understood, even if just for a moment. Most people don't realize how heavy it is to carry a reputation made by strangers. They see power, money, popularity. What they don't see is the loneliness that comes when the world treats your pain like entertainment. They don't see the nights when silence becomes the only safe place because every word spoken becomes a headline. That letter was not entertainment. It was mercy. It reminded him that even when millions misunderstand you, one honest soul can make you feel less alone. Fame often makes you feel alone, but belief, true belief, connects. And in that moment, he felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. He felt human again. He picked up the message once more, this time more gently, as if it were fragile, or maybe as if he was. His fingertips brushed over the paper like someone handling a piece of memory, because that's what it had become. A moment he would carry, not because it made him stronger, but because it allowed him to be soft. People think power is about standing tall, but sometimes power is found the moment your hands shake and you let them. He folded the note carefully, a quiet respect in his movements, and placed it somewhere safe. Not because it was valuable, but because it meant something, and in a life filled with expensive things that meant nothing, this one small message held more worth than gold. He didn't frame it. He didn't announce it. He didn't post it online to prove anything. No, he simply kept it for himself because some messages aren't meant to be shared with the world. Some are meant to heal the parts of us the world never sees. Johnny Depp once said in an interview that he never wanted to be placed on a pedestal. He didn't want to be worshipped. He just wanted to be understood. But life rarely gives us what we ask for. Instead, it gives us situations that test whether our souls can survive even when we are completely misunderstood. For a long time, he survived by staying quiet. Not because he had nothing to say, but because words had become dangerous. In a world that twists sentences into headlines, silence became his only shield. People mistook that silence for mystery. Others mistook it for guilt. But they never considered that maybe silence was just a form of protection. That's why this one message mattered so much. Not because it was loud, but because it spoke directly into the quiet he had been living in. He sat there for a long time after reading it. Not moving, not speaking. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but overflowing. Overflowing with memories of battles fought in private. Of days when even breathing felt like an act of fighting back. Of nights when he wondered if the world remembered that he was more than a headline. The words of the message echoed in his mind. You don't need to defend your truth. Time will show it without drama. And that's when he realized something powerful. Sometimes life does not need more noise. It needs honesty quietly spoken. It wasn't about clearing his name in front of millions. It was about getting back his peace in front of himself. Because the hardest battle is not proving people wrong. It's keeping your soul right. He leaned back slowly, a breath leaving his chest like a weight being lifted. Not all at once, but gradually like the slow release of something he'd held for far too long. He didn't smile. He didn't cry, but there was a softness in his eyes, a quiet acceptance that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to fight alone. Fame gave him applause. But this message gave him something applause never could. Relief. Relief that someone out there didn't need explanations or proof. That someone looked past the noise and simply chose to believe. Not with blind admiration, but with gentle human empathy. And empathy is the rarest kind of loyalty. As he folded the message the final time, one thought echoed in his heart. Not all heroes arrive with answers. Some arrive with understanding. And in a world obsessed with judging, understanding is a quiet kind of being a hero. Johnny didn't speak about the message publicly. He didn't mention it in interviews, not because he wanted to hide it, but because some moments aren't meant for the stage. They're meant for the soul, and the world doesn't always deserve to witness what is sacred. He placed a note in his coat pocket, right over his heart, not on purpose, but by instinct, as if a part of him needed that reminder close. Not to boost his confidence, but to restore something more fragile. His faith in humanity. For years, people looked at him like a character they could rewrite. They placed labels on him like stickers on a suitcase, never asking, just assuming. But this message didn't label him. It saw him. And being seen, truly seen, is one of the rarest experiences a human being can have. He once said, "My job is to pretend, but in real life, I just want to feel something real." That day, holding that message, he did. Most people think strength is loud, that it looks like big speeches and big gestures. But real strength is often quiet. It looks like a man silently folding a message because the words meant enough to be protected. No dramatic applause, no spotlight. He simply read a message and felt something real. And maybe the world didn't witness it, but his heart did. In a world where people are quick to judge and slow to understand, a single line of gentle truth can feel like a lifeline. We live in a time when voices are loud, but hearts feel lonelier than ever. People argue, comment, trend, cancel. Yet very few stop to say the words that hold true power. I see you, and I believe you. Sometimes healing does not come from medicine or time. Sometimes healing arrives disguised as a sentence. Not shouted, not announced, not broadcasted, just written quietly. Some might ask, why did his hand shake? Was it emotion? Was it pain? Was it exhaustion from years of fighting a battle that most people never truly understood? Maybe it was all of that. Or maybe it was relief. The kind of relief that comes when someone finally, after years of chaos, speaks, not to your image, but to your soul. Because when a person has been hurt by doubt, belief becomes the deepest form of love. He folded the note again and kept it safe. Not to prove anything to anyone, but to remind himself that even in a world that turned him into a headline, a moment of humanity still found its way through. And maybe that's the message we all need. You don't know what someone is carrying. You don't know what silent battle they're fighting. And you don't know which small act of kindness might be the one that keeps them going. So be gentle. The world has enough noise. What it needs is more letters like that one. Maybe you've never stood on a movie set or faced millions of eyes, but you probably faced judgment or loneliness in your own quiet way. So, let me ask you, have you ever received a message that changed you? A sentence, a word, a moment that reminded you that you're still human. Tell me in the comments, yes, I felt that. Or share that one sentence you still remember, because maybe someone reading your comment needed.